She answered the phone like she always did when she thought she had the upper hand. Steady tone, polite smile, pacing the room like nothing in the world could surprise her. I watched her from across the table, pretending not to listen. But the moment she repeated the phrase, "Yes, that's correct, my husband's name is on the paperwork," something inside me froze. The man on the line wasn't asking her to verify her own identity. He was confirming mine. My name, my credit, my insurance policy. And he wasn't confused. This was a final confirmation for a luxury vehicle that had already been processed that I hadn't purchased a car. I hadn't stepped foot in a dealership. And I sure as hell hadn't signed anything. Not recently. Not ever. Her voice stayed calm. Mine didn't speak at all. Because in that moment, I knew this wasn't some clerical mix-up. This was deliberate, coordinated, quiet, and somehow, she thought I'd never find out. My name's Adam. I'm 39. For the last 16 years, I've worked as a civil engineer, mostly infrastructure and public works. It's not glamorous, but it's steady, precise. My days are built on blueprints, permits, and progress that's measurable in inches, not drama. That mindset carried over into the rest of my life. I didn't chase flash. I focused on structure, financially, emotionally, even socially. If something wasn't stable, I didn't build on it. Over the years, I put together a modest but strong foundation. No debt beyond my mortgage. A car I owned outright. Credit in the high 700s, which I guarded like my passport. I wasn't stingy, I just respected the value of calm, of not owing anyone. I've always believed that the truest form of freedom is control over your own obligations. I lived by that. Quietly, Renee came into my life 7 years ago. We met at a fundraiser through mutual friends. She worked in luxury retail, always well-dressed, always with a story to tell. She was charm where I was caution, bold where I leaned measured. And in the beginning, I'll admit, it worked. Her energy balanced mine. She made rooms brighter. I gave her roots. Or at least I tried. We married a year after meeting. I thought we had an understanding, even if our personalities were different. I made enough to support us, and she worked part-time when she felt like it. Our finances weren't joint in the traditional sense. I handled the bills, the taxes, the savings. She handled the lifestyle, travel plans, dining out, holiday gifts. At the time, I didn't see a problem with that split. Looking back now, I realize I mistook her detachment for trust. That she never asked questions about our budget, never looked at the accounts, not because she believed in me, but because she already had other plans. Plans that didn't include my consent. It started like most things do, quietly, almost forgettably. Renee had been making offhand comments for a few weeks. Nothing confrontational, just little jabs that passed as casual remarks. "This car's starting to feel a little dated, don't you think?" Or, "You could easily upgrade if you wanted to." Sometimes she'd say it like a compliment, as if she were proud of how far I'd come. Other times, it had an edge, like I was holding her back from the lifestyle she thought she deserved. I didn't think much of it. I've always driven practical cars. Not junk, but never flashy. To me, a vehicle was just a tool, a way to get from site to site, from home to work. And as far as I was concerned, our current car worked fine. But then the insurance statement came in. The premium had jumped, noticeably. I assumed it was inflation, or maybe a clerical error. So I called the provider to sort it out. The rep was polite, asked me to verify some info, and then casually mentioned the new policy edition. A 2023 BMW X5, fully insured, registered under my name. At first, I thought he had the wrong file. I didn't argue. I just asked him to repeat it. And when he did, every word landed heavier. I told him I hadn't added a vehicle. He paused, then said the request had come in last month, digitally signed and approved. That's when my chest tightened. I checked our shared email, the one we barely used unless it was travel plans or bills. Buried beneath a few promotional messages was a thread from a dealership. The attachments were there: approval notice, payment terms, and a scanned financing agreement. My name at the top, my social security number listed, my digital signature at the bottom. Only, it wasn't mine. I've signed enough documents in my life to know what my signature looks like. This one had the shape, but not the pressure, not the flow. It looked traced, artificial, like someone had pulled it from an old lease and pasted it into place. I didn't want to believe it, not at first. My mind ran through every possible explanation: a dealership error, a stolen identity, some bizarre administrative mix-up. But none of those theories made sense. No one had access to my documents except me. Except Renee. I thought back to the week she went on a girls' trip to Palm Springs. I remembered her leaving in a rideshare. I remembered her coming back with new photos, new clothes, and stories about a spa. What I didn't remember was ever seeing a bill. No plane ticket. No receipts. There was one night, weeks before that trip, when she asked to borrow my laptop. Said hers was dead, and she just needed to order something. I didn't think twice. I was in the shower. She was always faster with tech stuff anyway. I never considered she might be accessing my documents. That she'd know where my files were stored. That she'd find an old PDF of my signature from an employment contract and use it for something I hadn't agreed to. The realization settled slowly, like wet cement setting in my chest. This wasn't a mistake. This was a forgery. A deliberate one. And it didn't come from a stranger halfway across the country. It came from across the bed that I didn't confront her that night. Not because I was unsure, but because I needed to. Stay ahead of it. Emotionally, I was splintering, but externally, nothing changed. I cooked dinner like usual. We talked about nothing. She scrolled through her phone with that casual boredom she wore like a second skin. Inside, I was running. Timelines. Cross-referencing dates, receipts, her movements. And watching her, really watching her, was like seeing someone I'd never properly studied before. The way she avoided eye contact during certain topics. The way she redirected questions with jokes. There was a choreography to her behavior I hadn't recognized before, and suddenly it all made sense, but I didn't let it show. The next day, I called my bank under the pretense of checking my account. I requested a credit report. Confirmed. Every hard inquiry. The BMW loan was active. Payments hadn't started yet, but the debt was real. Real enough to impact everything I'd built over the last decade. One false report, one missed payment, and my credit would take a hit I couldn't afford. And still, I kept my mouth shut that we sat on the couch that evening watching some reality show she loved. She laughed at a scene. I nodded, as if I was present. As if I wasn't mentally pulling apart the framework of our entire marriage at one point. I casually mentioned that my bank had flagged a strange transaction and I might need to pull some account statements. Her reaction? A simple weird, followed by a shrug and a return to her phone. No panic. No questions. Just indifference. Like the thought of financial fraud didn't faze her at all. That told me everything. This wasn't something she regretted. It wasn't some desperate impulse or misunderstanding. It was deliberate. And she believed she'd gotten away with it. So I played along. Because people only hide what they think you haven't seen. And I wanted to see everything. Before I showed her what I'd do with it. I booked the legal consult on my lunch break. Just a simple hour blocked off in my calendar. No mention of what for. The lawyer I met wasn't dramatic or theatrical. Just sharp, efficient, and very clear. I explained what had happened, laid out the documents I'd gathered so far, and waited for his reaction. He didn't flinch. He just asked one question. Did she have your permission? No, she didn't. And that changed everything. Apparently, being married doesn't give someone the legal right to use your identity, especially not for financial agreements you never saw. A spouse forging your signature is still fraud. There's no exemption for shared homes or shared last names. That was both comforting and sobering. Because while I had the law behind me, it also meant admitting, on record, that someone I lived with, someone I trusted, had crossed a criminal line from. That point on, everything became about documentation. Every email, every phone call, every timestamp. I pulled the dealership sales call, thankfully recorded. The voice on the line was hers. Clear as day. She gave my full name, verified details only I should have known, and laughed at the end. When the salesman asked if her husband was cool with it. Her answer? He doesn't need to be. He trusts me. That sentence stayed with me. The lawyer and I built the file piece by piece. My credit report, the dealership packet, the forged signature overlaid with my verified ones. We scraped browser history from my laptop. She'd logged into the financing portal using my device. Cookies and autofill did the rest. She had built this with precision, which meant I needed to dismantle it with the same. I froze my credit the same afternoon. Not just with one bureau, all three. Then I called the bank. Had her removed from our joint accounts, citing security concerns. No drama, no alert. Just protocol. She wouldn't know until she tried to log in. Next, I opened a separate account. Under my name only. moved what I needed, kept the rest intact. The idea wasn't to escalate. It was to contain. At this point, the goal wasn't revenge, it was recovery. Quiet, methodical recovery. Filing the fraud report felt strange. I wasn't reporting a stranger or a scammer. I was reporting my wife. But I didn't submit it as a spouse. I submitted it as a citizen, a victim, because that's what the evidence showed. My lawyer's advice was simple. Don't tip her off. Let the bank reach out. Let the investigation come from their side. If she thinks it's internal, she'll talk more freely. And in that silence, she'd show her hand. I waited, and for the first time in weeks, I wasn't reacting. I was building something she couldn't see. It happened on a Tuesday. Late morning. I was working from home, laptop open, but mostly for show. Renee was in her usual rhythm. Coffee, robe, checking emails with the TV humming in the background. The phone rang. Unknown number. She answered without hesitation, putting it on speaker like she always did when she wanted to seem in control of the situation. The man introduced himself as a representative from the bank's fraud division. Calm voice, polite tone. He asked if he was speaking to Mrs. Renee Morgan. She confirmed. Then he asked to verify her husband's date of birth. She paused, half a second too long, and answered. Then came the shift. We're just verifying some details around a recent auto loan application tied to Mr. Adam Morgan, he said. We noticed inconsistencies during a routine audit. I kept my eyes on my screen, pretending to read. Her posture stiffened just enough to register. Oh, that, she said. Yeah, that was a joint thing. My husband and I discussed it. Totally above board. The rep didn't push back. He simply said, we've initiated a fraud review due to the digital signature not matching verified records. At this point, the account is frozen. Silence. Renee looked at me. Just looked. Eyes scanning my face for a reaction. I didn't blink. Didn't move. Just scrolled through nothing, letting the room grow quieter than it had ever been. The call ended with a polite thank you and a promise of follow-up. She hung up slowly, still staring. You knew they'd call, she said, voice flatter than I expected. I just nodded once. The next call came an hour later, from the dealership. She took it in the kitchen, voice barely above a whisper, but I still caught enough. They were pausing delivery. Something about pending verification. She asked if they could just switch it to her name. The conversation ended abruptly. By the evening, her tone had changed. She wasn't angry. Not yet. She was confused, nervous, trying to backtrack. She asked why the bank was calling her and not me. I told her calmly that they had flagged a signature discrepancy, that it wasn't my job to explain it. She didn't say much after that, but later that night, after we'd eaten dinner in near silence, she tried to play the emotional card. Said the whole thing was blown out of proportion. That couples make financial decisions all the time. That I was being dramatic. That we're married. And that should mean something. And then she said it. Why would you do this to me? I looked at her, not with anger, but with something colder. More final. Why would you? I said. She went quiet again. This time, she didn't try to fill the space. She just stood there, arms crossed like she was cold, but I knew better. That wasn't chill. That was exposure. In her mind, the whole plan was airtight. I wasn't supposed to notice. And if I did, she probably thought I'd yell, argue, maybe storm out for a night and cool off. She didn't expect protocol, or legal filings, or a bank investigation with time-stamped evidence. She expected emotion, not structure. And that's what unsettled her. It wasn't just that she got caught. It was how she got caught, professionally, quietly, without a single raised voice. After that, she tried to reclaim some footing, started hinting that maybe we should talk to a counselor, that we drifted, that this wasn't all her fault. But I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have thoughts, but because nothing she said at that point could fix what was already broken. She didn't betray me with a scream. She did it with silence, and I returned the favor. And somehow, that hit harder than anything else I could have said. The loan didn't go through. The dealership backed out as soon as the fraud investigation became official. No vehicle was delivered. No title transferred. And once they realized I had legal representation and documented evidence, they chose silence over resistance. I didn't need to threaten. I didn't need to escalate. The weight of the truth did the work for me. My credit took a dip. Temporary, but still frustrating. It felt like being penalized for someone else's recklessness. Still, with my lawyer's help, I filed a fraud correction report. The bureaus eventually removed the inquiry, though it took calls, forms, and time. That's something people don't talk about. Even when you prove you're the victim, you still have to clean up the mess. Renee didn't say much after that. There was no tearful confession, no apology, just quiet blame, the kind that hides in half sentences and cold dinners. A few weeks later, I told her I wanted space. She said nothing. We both knew the damage wasn't temporary, that we separated without a scene. No police, no shouting, no drama. I boxed up my things and moved into a small rental across town. It wasn't ideal, but it was mine. And after everything that had been done in my name, I needed something that belonged entirely to me. 6 months passed. I stayed focused on work, kept things steady. Slowly, the weight lifted. I applied for a new car loan, this time under my own terms, fully transparent, every detail double-checked. It wasn't the flashiest vehicle on the lot, but it was mine. No hidden paperwork. No surprises. I still believe in commitment, in the idea that two people can build a life together. But I don't believe in blind trust anymore. Not the kind that ignores red flags in the name of love. Trust should never be traded for convenience. And silence should never be mistaken for stability. That if you're watching this and you feel something isn't right, if the numbers don't add up, if your gut keeps tightening with every small excuse, don't talk yourself out of it. Don't wait for the damage to become undeniable. Protect your name before someone else decides to use it. You don't need permission to defend your peace.